Should we wait a few more minutes, Mrs. Fletcher? The funeral director asked, his eyes sweeping across the quiet chapel. I pressed my lips together and replied softly, "No need." My husband was never late a single day in his life. The wind hissed softly through the cold rows of seats, lifting the black ribbons as if trying to carry away the last bits of dignity. There was no son, no daughter, not a single grandchild, only me, the woman who had held his hand through 48 years of joys and struggles, standing among withered flowers and a prayer that felt half-hearted. Online, my daughter had just posted a picture from brunch with a mimosa in hand. My son checked in from a golf course, smiling as he talked about big deals. Meanwhile, I was laying his father to rest alone. I placed my hand on the coffin lid, feeling the cold bite through my skin, and remembered what my husband had told me. If you ever find yourself left behind, turn loneliness into a reason for justice. I raised my head. They think this funeral marks the end, but they do not realize this marks the start of their judgment. If you're still listening, please tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you share adds to this journey. And if this story has touched your heart, don't forget to click like so it can reach more people. My name is Marian Fletcher. I am 71 years old, a widow living in a small coastal town in Maine. I used to own a small accounting practice that I ran for over 30 years. I was taught to value discipline, punctuality, and keeping my word. Principles my husband Ned followed until the very end. I have two grown children, Grant and Sloan, and a grandson named Caleb. For much of my life, I believed that motherhood meant simply enduring. But standing alone at Ned's casket, I learned otherwise. Love is not about endlessly rescuing someone. I am clear headed, steady, and calm enough now to rewrite my will, to let go of entitlement, and to pass on my legacy to the one who truly values it. I am no longer seeking sympathy. Instead, I am choosing justice and clarity. Not a single wreath bore my children's names, no card, no message. The elderly pastor, probably called from a small nearby church, read the prayer without looking at me. His voice was flat and dry, like an old sheet of paper. Only the wind and the chapel door creaking now and then broke the silence. I sat in the front pew, surrounded by 5 empty chairs, my hands clenched to stop them from trembling. Each time the wind slipped through, my black veil fluttered like a sighing spirit. My Ned Edward Fletcher didn't deserve to be sent off in a room this cold. He was the most punctual, honest man I knew. All his life, he never made anyone wait, not even for a doctor's appointment or a quick trip to the grocery store out in the suburbs. I remembered him saying, "People are judged by how they arrive and how they leave." And now he was leaving quietly with no one there. I looked around. The polished wooden pews seemed to have been cared for more carefully than any concern from family. Two staff members at the funeral home stood in a corner, checking their watches and waiting to clean up once the ceremony was over. I simply wanted it to be finished. Not because I was in a hurry, but because I didn't want anyone to see the truth. Ned had spent a lifetime building a family that no longer had a heart. As they began lowering the coffin, I moved a little closer. The ropes creaked under tension. Dry earth crunched against the wood like knocks on my chest. I stood there without crying. Not because I didn't feel pain, but because the ache had settled into something still and heavy, like a stone pressing on my ribs. A worker bowed his head and asked softly, "Would you like to stay a little longer?" I simply nodded and remained after everyone else had gone. The wind carried the scent of soil and pine. My eyes fixed on the temporary metal plaque fastened into the grass, the rough printed line, "Edward Fletcher, beloved husband, father, and forgotten." I don't know who added that last word, but it was more truthful than any eulogy. Back home, I opened the door and listened to the familiar floorboards creaking beneath my steps. Suddenly, the house felt enormous and empty, almost to the point of being meaningless. Every corner, every object held a story, now silent and waiting to be told, but no one was there to listen. Ned's recliner sat where it always did, sunken at the back. The Sunday paper was half folded on the table. His slippers were placed neatly side by side, just as they always had been. I sat in the chair across from them and stared at the empty space between us. I reached for the special occasion wine, the bottle Ned often said to save for guests. Today, there were no visitors, only me, and I decided I was worth the poor wine. I poured a glass. The deep red wine caught the lamplight as I held the glass. The first sip touched my tongue, bitter and tannic, the way everything I've swallowed over the years has been. I picked up my phone, knowing I shouldn't, but I did it anyway. On Instagram, Sloane, my daughter, posted a photo of herself with 3 friends, each holding a mimosa, with the caption, Sunday brunch with my girls, live, laugh, love. 2 hours while I stood beside my father's coffin, I found myself scrolling through my phone. Grant, my son, had checked in at a fancy golf course with the caption, Killer deal, perfect weather. Both of their smiles were bright and happy. There was no space for a funeral, for a father or mother alone at a gravesite. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from a numb shock. I placed the phone face down and stared at the wine glass. The red glow from the drink reflected my tired face, lined and worn, yet somehow more honest than ever before. Pain can wear a heart down, but it can also strip away illusions. At that moment, I understood that I no longer wanted to be the long suffering, endlessly forgiving mother. I had spent my entire life trying to be loved, but the people I had cared for only seemed to take. I stood up and went into Ned's study. Everything on his desk was arranged as if he might walk in at any moment. The Parker pen, his pill schedule notebook, his reading glasses placed at page 47 of The Old Man in the Sea, all were waiting. I opened the third drawer, where he kept his important papers. Underneath the tax files and insurance policies was a brown folder labeled Estate Ned and Marion. I sat down and placed it in front of me, then opened it slowly, page after page. This house, the lake cabin in Vermont, savings, retirement accounts. Everything listed the beneficiaries as Grant Fletcher and Sloane Whitaker. Next to their names were my signature and Ned's. We signed those papers 2 years ago, when we still believed our children understood that a legacy meant more than just money. I stared at that line for a long moment. My fingers trembled, not from age, but because something long cooled was beginning to stir again. Betrayal. Not betrayal by strangers, but by family. The same people who called me mom and promised I will take care of you. I let out a short, dry laugh like an empty glass. I found Harold Benton's number, our family lawyer. When the phone pitch changed to a message, I left a voicemail. Harold, this is Marion Fletcher. Tomorrow morning, I want to meet with you. I want to change the entire will. I put the phone down and sat quietly. Sunset cast a glow across our old wedding photograph. It showed me and Ned in front of the roses he had planted. I remembered him saying, if you're ever left alone, don't cry. Do what's right. I took the last sip of wine, then stood up and softly told the empty room, I'm doing what's right, Ned. Afterward, I switched off the light and let the room fall into darkness. For the first time in years, I didn't feel weak. Tomorrow, I would start fresh, not with tears, but with the justice I would create on my own. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The wall clock's ticking sounded like the quiet steps of time, reminding me that tomorrow would be different. A day when I stopped being the mother who tries to fix every mistake. I turned on the small lamp at the dining table. Warm light spread across the oak surface. From the drawer, I took out stacks of invoices, bank books, and receipts, which soon formed a wall of paper. Ned used to say, numbers don't lie. Today, I finally understood those words completely. The first page showed a silver-inked invoice for Sloane's wedding. She had begged me then, Mom, I just want something small and simple. But her idea of simple included champagne at a 4-star hotel, a custom New York dress, and a jazz band playing all night. I wired $15,000 just so my daughter could feel loved. She never paid back a single cent, never said thank you. The second page reveals Grant's familiar handwriting. Mom, I need an advance for property taxes this year. I'll pay you back soon. Yeah, I remember Ned having just left the hospital after knee surgery. We had been tightening our belts everywhere, but I still sent $8,200 with a small note. Don't beat yourself up. Just get steady. Grant never mentioned that note, and no one paid anything back. I opened a thicker envelope with over 30 slips. Each slip represented another emergency. Garage door broken, ceiling leak in the living room, summer camp for the grandkids, even Sloane's marriage therapy retreat. I paid for all of it. I used to think that's what a mother does. Looking now, my motherly love was like a fire hose turned on whenever they didn't plan, then quickly turned off once their flames were out. I wondered if they ever saw me as someone with boundaries. Or was I simply a walking wallet, a never ending source of money out of fear of being called a bad mom? I paused to pour tea. The lamp's light reflected off the glass and illuminated my hands. Veins appeared beneath the thin skin, marked and prominent. Hands that worked tirelessly, that hugged, that wiped tears away. Hands that signed check after check so my children wouldn't be embarrassed. When I opened Ned's old card box, a small cream-colored note slipped out, folded in half. Caleb's messy handwriting from when he was 11. Grandma, I'll take care of you like you take care of me. I promise, Caleb. The writing slanted slightly. Ink was smudged, probably from sticky fingers. I gently rubbed my thumb over the strokes and felt my heart tighten, not with sadness, but with the comforting knowledge that at least one person still remembered me with genuine care. I placed Caleb's note beside our wedding photo. Two men, one gone, one so young, both proof that kindness still exists. I opened my phone again and looked through my daughter's page. The brunch photo had dozens of comments. She's always beautiful, such a queen. I offered a faint smile. I had bought the dress in that photo as a birthday gift last year when she said, "Mom, I have nothing nice to wear to meet clients." Now I realized I hadn't just bought a gift. I had provided props for their performance. I took Ned's leather notebook, turned to a blank page, and wrote in my own handwriting, "Fairness isn't dividing things equally. Fairness is giving to those who value it." I gazed at the sentence. Steady now, not trembling. After enough pain, the hand becomes steady. I tore a fresh sheet of paper and drew two columns titled Cut and Keep. I listed the $2,000 monthly automatic transfer to the grant and Sloane's auto insurance. I'd been paying these quietly, using their secondary cards on my bank account. All co-owner credit cards were open when Ned was still alive. The Ned Fletcher Memorial Scholarship, a private savings fund for Caleb, has now been transferred to Inheris, an independent account, and will remain there until I decide otherwise, along with my own dignity. I folded the list and placed it into the estate binder. I don't quite understand why, but doing that made me feel lighter. Maybe because, for the first time, I was choosing myself. Outside, the wind picked up, and the curtains moved gently, casting faint shapes on the wall. I looked at the old wall clock Ned used to set every evening. Even a few minutes off used to bother him. The hour hand had just reached 11, and the minute hand was approaching 30 minutes past. I heard his voice, calm and confident, echoing in my memory. "On time, Marion, on time." I smiled. "Yes, Ned, this time I am." I turned on my laptop and checked my appointments. I typed, "Meeting with Harold Benton, 8:30 a.m., estate amendment." Then I printed the note and taped it to the bedroom mirror, where I would see it in the morning, not just as a reminder, but as a promise to myself. I wouldn't give up. I tidied the table, organized the bills by year, and packed them into a small box. That box contained not just numbers, but pieces of a mother's life spent in gratitude. I labeled it paid in full, not because they reimbursed me, but because I had fulfilled my duty. Then I went to bed. The wedding photo still sat on the nightstand, the soft lamp illuminating our young faces. I placed a silver signing pen beside it, the gift Ned gave me when I started my bookkeeping business. Marking it as a witness for tomorrow, I told myself tomorrow I will use that pen to write a future for the one who deserves it. I pulled the covers up and listened to the wind outside on the porch and the old quiet sigh of the woods. Ned's scent still clung to the pillow soap and cedar. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Asa, sleep well, Ned. I'll be on time tomorrow." A draft lifted a corner of a note on the table, and I could almost hear his voice answering in the darkness. "On time, Marion. And this time, don't go alone." I smiled as I drifted into sleep, knowing I would no longer be late to my own life. Tomorrow, with the sun rising, I would start reclaiming my worth as a mother, not as a walking wallet, but as a person with dignity still intact. The next morning, a thin layer of fog hovered over Maine's sky, pale as winter's last breath. I woke before the alarm, brewed a cup of black coffee, and stood by the window watching the first light filter through the maples outside. It wasn't warm, but it reminded me that I was alive, and today I needed to live with clarity. I put on the gray wool coat Ned had chosen for our 40th anniversary trip. The collar was worn, but it still kept its shape. I brushed my hand over it as if touching a memory. Then I grabbed the estate folder along with Ned and Marion's file. I had prepared certificates, copies of the will, the death record, details of assets, and bank information. A lifetime summarized into just a few pages. Once I fastened the last button, the wall clock read 7:50. I whispered, "On time, Ned. I'm punctual." Harold Benton's office is on the second floor of an old brick building on Main Street. I have been inside that door many times over the past 20 years, from our first mortgage to finalizing our retirement plans. The oak door swung open, and the familiar scent greeted me. Old wood, paper, a hint of eucalyptus oil. It always felt like stepping into a place where memories are stored away neatly. Harold was at his usual desk, with framed diplomas arranged perfectly on the wall behind him. When he looked up, he immediately stood. "Marion, I heard about Ned. Please accept my sincere condolences." His voice was calm and steady, remaining professional. I nodded in response. "Thank you, Harold." Since he liked everything on schedule, I arrived 10 minutes early. He offered a brief, sad smile and indicated the chair. A hot cup of coffee was ready and waiting. He still remembered. "No sugar, no cream, Marianne," he said softly, with his hand resting on the folder. "I heard your message. Before we begin, I need to ask, are you certain?" I met his gaze. I set aside my hesitation. "Yesterday, Harold?" He straightened up. "I understand. I took out the old will signed by Ned and myself. I am removing Grant and Sloan entirely from the will and creating an irrevocable trust for Caleb, my grandson." Harold's eyebrows rose slightly, but he allowed me to continue. "Caleb is the only one in the next generation who still remembers to check in, remembers birthdays, and still shows respect to his grandparents. I am not giving him gratitude based on performance. I want to give the boy a fair chance to grow without him being molded into his parents' kind of ingratitude." Harold opened his notebook, his tone becoming more formal. "How do you want this trust arranged? I decided last night. Caleb can only access funds for tuition, healthcare, or lawful personal investments until he turns 30. After that, he will have full control, but it must be completely protected from any influence by Grant or Sloan, including indirect ones." He nodded and started writing quickly. "Very specific. I can include a no parental influence clause. Would you like me to add a co-rusty?" I shook my head. "No, Caleb will choose a financial advisor when he becomes of age. I don't want any family member, including myself, interfering with his decisions." Harold studied me quietly for a long moment. The room was so still I could hear his fountain pen moving smoothly across the page. When he looked up, sunlight from the window reflected off his silver-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Fletcher," he said slowly, "not many people at your age make this kind of decision." The words were clear and respectful. No anger, no resentment, just straightforward understanding. I smiled faintly, not out of anger, but from clarity. "I don't have time to live with other people's doubts, Harold." He nodded and pushed a fresh set of documents toward me, tabs clearly marked for easy reference. "If you're ready, we can begin signing." I picked up the pen. The first page was headed with Ned's name prominently in bold, followed by mine. Beneath the small line, it read, "Amendment to the estate of Edward and Marion Fletcher." When my pen touched the paper, my hand remained steady, with no trembling. I signed the first page, then added 5 more signatures, each one cutting through the invisible ties that had held me for decades of motherhood. Harold collected the pages and smoothed the edges as if closing someone else's chapter. "Today, I will make copies to file with the bank and the trust administrator. Caleb's trust will be active within 72 hours. I nodded in approval. Good. I want everything settled before Sunday. You're still the most punctual person I know, Harold said softly with a gentle smile. No, I replied. Ned is. I'm simply making sure our last appointment is on time. Harold accompanied me to the door. Mrs. Marion, he said, if you change your mind. I shook my head. I won't. People often change when they haven't seen things clearly. I've seen everything. Harold looked into my eyes for a moment, then said, I understand. Peace be with you. I stepped out into the morning light. Sunlight streams through the tall glass of the building, making me squint. From across the street, I catch the aroma of freshly roasted coffee and hear the faint toll of a church bell. I pause on the steps, feeling as if I've removed a damp, moldy suit of armor. Heavy, unnecessary, and finally discarded. Each breath seems lighter than the one before. I step off the curb and cross at the marked lines. People rush by on their way to work, some with coffees in hand, others with phones pressed to their ears. I flow with the crowd without feeling out of place. Maybe because at last I know I'm walking in my own direction. I pause at the old bakery nearby, where Ned used to buy muffins every Friday morning. The clerk still recognizes me and greets me with the familiar nickname, Mrs. F. Haven't seen you in a while, as she hands me the bag. I smile comfortably. Yes, I've just been tidying up a few things in my life, I say. She doesn't fully understand, but she nods politely. Back in the car, my phone buzzes. Sloane's name appears on the screen. I sigh, sure she has no idea what I did today. The message is just one line. Mom, I've got a spa voucher this weekend. Come with me. I already booked for 2, followed by a heart emoji. It's a symbol my daughter uses instead of real emotion. I delete the unread message and don't respond. I start the engine and glance into the rearview mirror. An older woman, 71 years old, looks back at me. No makeup, nothing flashy, but there's a light in her eyes I haven't seen in years, the kind of spark that comes from believing her worth is her own choice. I turn on the radio, and an old Frank Sinatra song begins to play. His warm baritone voice and the familiar words, I did it my way, fill the car. I smile and gently tap the steering wheel to the rhythm. For the first time in years, I feel no regret. I simply feel that I am in the right place, with the right person, staying true to myself. That morning, the sky was unusually clear and blue. After weeks of rain, it seemed as if the sun was offering a fresh beginning just for me. I woke early and put on a white shirt and a pale gray cardigan. Carefully, I pinned the silver leaf brooch Ned gave me for our 25th anniversary before leaving. I paused in front of the mirror for a few moments. The woman looking back wasn't the good mother she once was. She was someone learning to take control of her life. The Davenport First Nationals branch is in the downtown area, a modern glass building where Ned and I had kept a joint account for over 30 years. Today, I was there not to make a deposit, but to release the invisible ties that had held me. The glass doors opened smoothly, and a cool breeze from the air conditioning greeted me. The lobby was quiet, only the sound of heels clicking and keyboards clicking. The receptionist recognized me immediately and stood up. Hello, Mrs. Fletcher. Our manager, Mrs. Eleanor Davenport, is waiting in a private room. This way, please. The corner glass room on the second floor was filled with bright light. As I entered, the transparent walls reflected my silhouette, making me feel small but not weak. Eleanor stood there, ready to greet me. She appeared to be around 55 tall, with early silver hair cut neatly, bright eyes, and a voice that commanded attention. Mrs. Fletcher, she said, shaking my hand with deliberate firmness. Harold had called ahead. I've prepared everything you'll need. I nodded. Thank you, Eleanor. I want to follow the proper procedures, but without unnecessary delays. We sat across from each other, with a faint aroma of coffee between us. I took a beige folder from my bag, containing copies of the amended will and the power of attorney Harold had arranged. I slid them across the table to her. These are the valid documents. I want to eliminate all automatic links connected to the names of Grant and Sloane Fletcher, including any beneficiary rights and access. Eleanor carefully read each page, her eyes not rushing through any line. And when she finished, she looked up with a composed expression. Are you sure you want to fully remove your children's rights? If they react, disagreements might arise. I responded clearly. I'm not worried about disputes. I am concerned about ambiguity. If they wish to respond, let the court handle its responsibilities. I have evidence, and most importantly, I have a reason. She didn't insist, merely nodded. All right, then proceed immediately. Eleanor began outlining a sequence of forms. Each one bore a familiar header. Change of beneficiary for account ending 3645, joint access termination for account 2027, and several other sub-accounts that Ned and I had set up. She explained everything slowly and clearly. I listened carefully, signed the documents, signed again, and then signed once more where a signature was required for certification. I stated that after removing their beneficiary rights, I want Caleb's trust to be reorganized with stronger safeguards. I want to include provisions that prevent family disputes, send alerts about family-related risks, and keep a record of all disbursements. Any withdrawal must be documented. Eleanor raised her eyebrows, showing she was impressed. You've done your homework. I offered a small smile. I used to be a bookkeeper, and I've been taken advantage of by those I loved most. Using my own signature, I won't let that happen again. She wrote it down, her voice adopting a formal tone. We can establish a dual authentication system for added security. Every payment will need approval from both Caleb and an independent advisor. No one can access detailed information without the beneficiary's permission. I nodded, pleased. That's exactly what I wanted. After nearly an hour of reviewing, we examined every account, from personal savings and retirement funds to physical items Ned had registered. His grandfather's pocket watch, now insured as an asset, caught my eye. I saw the listed value, 3,500, representing a small object filled with memories spanning 3 generations. I requested it be moved to a category for keepsakes with no monetary value to prevent misunderstandings. Eleanor smiled. Many people don't think that far ahead. I responded gently. It isn't about the distance, but the thoroughness. At my age, being thorough is a way of showing love for myself. With each signature, I felt as if I were cutting away an old piece of fabric called duty. Duty as a mother, the responsibility of always being the woman who understands others well. Each signature I made became a reminder that I was stepping away from my previous life. Everyone assumed I would stay silent and endure until the end. Once the paperwork was completed, Eleanor intertwined her fingers and looked at me thoughtfully. Her gaze was more than just professional. It reflected a woman who truly knew loss. Mrs. Marion, she asked softly, may I ask honestly, are you afraid of being alone? I paused for a few moments. Sunlight streamed through the glass, casting sparkling patterns on the stone floor. I watched them for a moment, then said, no, I've been through it, and I'm still standing. Eleanor offered a gentle smile, free from pity. Then she said, congratulations. Most people don't manage to escape. I met her gaze and expressed my thanks. I used to fear loneliness, but I have come to see that the worst isn't being by yourself. It's being surrounded by people who leave you feeling empty. No one said anything more. In the quiet, I heard the final stroke of the pen on the confirmation paper. As I stood there, Eleanor handed me an envelope. Inside were certified copies. She paused for a moment, as if recalling something. I heard from Harold that you want an additional sub-account. I nodded. Yes, I do. I would like to set aside about $50,000 from the main fund for a local scholarship focused on trades, carpentry, and mechanics for young people. I took a breath and continued. Please name it the Ned Fletcher Trades and Crafts Scholarship. He always believed that working with your hands is just as honorable as working with your mind. Eleanor's smile became warm and touched by the moment. A living legacy, not one kept hidden in a safe. That's truly beautiful, Mrs. Fletcher, I said. A legacy only matters if it keeps creating value. Ned would have loved this. She signed the document electronically, sealed it, then stood up to shake my hand once more. On behalf of the bank, thank you for your trust. And if I may speak honestly, she added, tilting her head slightly and lowering her voice, not many women your age dare to start rewriting their lives when everyone believes their story has already ended. I smiled to myself. I am not finished, Eleanor. I am not done. I am simply choosing a different way to move forward. I left the bank holding a small stack of papers. A breeze from Main Street lifted my hair gently. I looked back at the gleaming glass building reflecting the figure of a woman walking away, small but with a straight posture. The papers felt strangely light in my hand, and I felt even lighter because I knew those pages represented more than just signatures. They signified the end of guilt called sacrifice. I crossed the quiet street and paused at Maple and Bain, the cafe where Ned and I met every Saturday morning. The wooden sign still hung a little crooked. The aroma of fresh coffee drifted through the air. I went inside, ordered a cappuccino, and waited at the window table, the one we always liked for its view of Maine. The young server smiled warmly as she placed the cup on the table. I nodded in thanks and gently stirred the foam, the steam fogging my glasses. I watched people passing by, older couples walking hand in hand, children riding bikes to school. An enjoyable feeling of everyday life settled in my chest, and that simple sense of calm eased my heart. I took a sip, letting the bitter and sweet flavors blend like a life that no longer needs to distinguish right from wrong, only clarity. I looked up at the clear sky through the glass and softly said, "Do you see this, Ned?" I did it. And in the slight clink of spoon against cup, I could almost hear his voice answer softly and warmly as it always did. "I know, Marion. I always believed in you." I smiled, leaned back, and let the noon sunlight flood through the window. For the first time in many years, I felt completely at peace. The next noon, as I was watering the lavender pots on the porch, the doorbell rang. 3 times in a row, urgent and impatient. I knew that sound didn't belong to a stranger. I wiped my hands on a small towel and went to answer the door. Before everything was fully open, my daughter's voice suddenly cut through sharply like a blade. "What's this rumor about you changing the will?" "No, hello. No, how are you?" She looked around without really waiting for an answer. Just a naked challenge, as if she was speaking to an opponent, not her mother. Sloane stood on the porch, oversized sunglass hiding half her face, her expensive blonde waves casually tossed over her shoulder. I noticed the Tiffany necklace around her neck, the one I had given her for her 40th birthday, a gift that had cost me nearly a month's pension. I opened the door wider and stepped aside. "Come in. Standing in the sun isn't good for your makeup." She walked in. Her heels clicked loudly and coldly on the wooden floor. When she took off her sunglasses, I saw her eyes. The gaze that once used to soften me now simply irritated and calculated. "What did Harold say to you?" she pressed. I replied evenly, "Not much. Just finalizing the legal steps for what I want," I said. She raised an eyebrow, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "So is it true? Did you really change the will? It's not just a rumor." I met her gaze steadily. "It's a fact." A heavy silence settled over the room. I could hear the wall clock ticking each second and the steady hum of the air conditioner. Sloane took a breath, then let out a short, nervous laugh. "Bunny, all my life, I've only wanted you to be looked after, but you always think I'm wrong." I frowned. "Looked after?" "Yes." "Who took you to your eye appointment last year? Who bought you a new phone so you could call more easily? Who arranged for the handyman to fix the porch after Dad passed away?" She began listing every little task with pride, like a lawyer presenting evidence. But all I felt was the growing distance between us with each sentence. Because in that long list, she never mentioned the one thing I truly wanted to hear, the thing she didn't do: showing up at her father's funeral. I stayed silent for a moment, then spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "You're very good at keeping score, but your father wouldn't be impressed." She frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" I took my phone out of my pocket, woke the screen, and held it in front of me. There was her post from the day of the funeral, Sunday brunch with my girls. A big smile, a bright mimosa, a beach in the background. She looked at it, then lowered her hand, her voice turning a cold. "You always love to compare. You blow things out of proportion. I cut her off. "No, Sloane, I'm not comparing. I see clearly now. And I am not punishing. I am freeing." She froze. "Freeing? What do you mean?" I set my phone down on the table, my voice steady. "Freeing you from the burden of pretending to be a good daughter. Freeing me from the illusion that if I keep giving, Love will come back. I don't know where you stand in your life, still holding on or already letting go. But if you've ever had to close a door on someone you love, leave a line for yourself in the comments. Sometimes writing it down can help you heal. Sloan let out a hard, confused half laugh. What about Caleb then? Are you really leaving everything in the hands of that boy? He's only 16. He doesn't have much experience. He's just a kid. I looked at her for a long moment. In her eyes, I saw myself many years ago, a woman worn out by the fear of losing control. But there was one difference between me and Sloan. I had learned to let go. Yes, I said softly. He's just a child, but at least he shows up without being asked. She hesitated. Her eyes flicked away for a second. I knew she remembered the day of the funeral when Caleb had texted me, "I'm sorry, Mom won't let me come. I just want to hug you." And she, his mother, allowed her son to rehearse happy family scenes for social media. The atmosphere in the room grew tense. I poured some tea and placed a cup in front of her. The steam rose gently between us, fragile as the last thread holding us together. She didn't reach for it. Someone's pushing you into this, right, Harold? Someone else? You don't realize how complicated money really is. They might try to take advantage of you. I offered a gentle smile that even she found surprising. Sloan, I don't need anyone to remind me. And about taking advantage, I've already learned enough from my best student. She tightened her purse strap. You'll regret this. That's okay, I replied. Regret belongs to those who still feel. I only feel lighter. She turned sharply on her heel, her stiletto heels pounding the floor as if to drown out the trembling in her voice. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving a sharp, costly perfume in the air. It was elegant, but lacked warmth. The scent stayed for a long time, like a remnant of someone who used to be my daughter, but is now simply a stranger passing through her mother's life. The afternoon gradually faded, sunlight casting a golden glow over the steps. I brewed fresh tea, sat alone by the window, and opened my small notebook. The page where I had written, "Fairness is giving to those who deserve it," had darkened in color. With a red pen, I added, "And kindness shouldn't be given to those who treat it like obligation." A soft wind whispered through the crack in the door frame, carrying the scent of pine resin from the backyard. I felt my heart beat steady, calm and steady, not heavy or angry, as quiet as the ticking of the kitchen clock. I looked around the house. Everything bore Ned's presence: the wedding photograph, the chair where he read the newspaper, the old curtains I still hadn't replaced. I missed him, but it didn't cause pain, perhaps because the worst suffering had already passed. Around 4 in the afternoon, I stepped outside onto the porch to check the mail. A gust of wind lifted the doormat, revealing something wedged underneath. I bent down and pulled out a folded note. The handwriting was Sloane's. Familiar, hurried, uneven. "You don't understand my pressure. I'm carrying more than you think." That was all. No greeting, no signature. A weak attempt cloaked in pride. I looked at it for a few moments, then folded the paper and slipped it into the small drawer on the table where I keep old bills, doctor's slips, and other unimportant things. I labeled it Misk, not out of contempt, but because I understand some things don't require explanation. Truth does not need defending, and love cannot save someone who refuses to understand. That evening, I ate a simple vegetable soup alone. The house was quiet, but not empty, perhaps because this silence no longer carried waiting. On the table, my phone lit up with a single message from Grant. Sloan had just called me. What did you do to make her cry? I turned off the screen without replying. I no longer feel the need to justify my decisions to anyone. I stood up, went out to the porch, and called the local locksmith. "Hello, Mrs. Fletcher." "Your locks have been working fine, haven't they?" the man asked. "Perfectly," I replied. "But I want to change it." "Worried about break-ins?" I smiled as I watched the sunset turn the steps a golden hue. "No, I simply want to remind myself that it's time to close the door at the proper moment." That night, I went to bed early. Outside, the wind gently shook the trees. I dreamt of Ned, standing by the lavender, hands in his pockets, eyes calm. When I drew closer, he only said, "You did what I hoped, Marion. You're not afraid anymore." I tried to respond, but the dream faded into the soft light of dawn. I woke with my heart beating slowly and lightly, like the morning breeze. An old chapter had quietly ended without tears, leaving only clarity. That bright morning, I understood. Sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do is lock the door, even when the person behind it is her own child. On Thursday afternoon, a gentle, stubborn rain fell, as if the sky itself was hesitant to cry out loud. I was wiping the wedding photo frame on the shelf when I heard a knock. It wasn't Sloane's impatient pounding, but two brief, polite taps, like a careful signal. Knock, knock. I took a deep breath. It was Grant. My son always manages to arrive like a bank officer, polished, purposeful, and never empty handed. When I opened the door, there he was with Vanessa, his wife, the woman with the painted upturned smile that never quite reaches her eyes. Grant wore a navy suit with a silver gray tie. Vanessa was dressed in a cream trench coat and light colored heels, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. They seemed more suited to a business meeting than to visiting a recently widowed mother's home. "Hi, Mom," Grant said quietly, sounding distant. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in." Vanessa was the first to speak, not waiting a moment. "We hear you've made some significant changes. Harold Benton handled them, right?" She mentioned his name as if Harold was someone I hired for something questionable. I kept my voice steady. "Yes. Harold has been our trusted attorney for 25 years. Is there a problem?" Vanessa pursed her lips and sat down on the sofa without waiting for me to invite her. Sometimes when people are feeling emotional, they can be easily influenced. Making decisions in such moments can also carry legal risks. I studied her carefully, slow and deliberate. "Risky for whom, Vanessa?" She paused, then offered a smile, sharp and familiar, with the ever-present edge. "For everyone, if no one is truly prepared." I gestured toward the chair opposite us. "Sit down, Grant." My son followed my instruction, placing his briefcase down and sitting upright. I couldn't help but notice his hand, the expensive watch I had given him for his wedding, still on his wrist, but the skin was dry and slightly calloused. Not from work, but from stress. I settled into my seat, leaning back, fingers intertwined. "So, did you come to visit me today or to check up on me?" Grant looked away and took a small breath. "Mom, I should have called. Work has been overwhelming lately. A new project, new clients, everything's in chaos." I raised an eyebrow. "And you think work is enough of a reason not to call your mother? The woman who just buried her husband. You, your father?" Vanessa laid a hand on his knee, signaling him to stop. "We're not here to argue. We just want to understand why you took both of them out of the will without telling us." That hurt, Grant. I looked my son straight in the eyes. "Do you remember the last time you visited this house?" "Christmas last year." "No, that was when you sent a gift in the mail. The last time you actually stepped inside was 3 years ago, when you needed me to co-sign a loan. Since then, every time you've called, it started with, 'Mom, I need,' and ended with, 'Thanks, Mom, I'm busy.'" No one said a word. Vanessa's eyes wandered around the room. Then she slowly reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, as if she needed to check some evidence. I stood up and moved toward the bookcase. Each step felt heavy, as though it carried the weight of the years you hadn't been here. From the second shelf, I took out an old photograph. It showed Grant at 10, standing beside Ned, holding the first wooden bat his father had whittled for him. I placed the photo on the table between us. "You removed yourselves from this house," I said, "when you chose to be absent at the very moment your father needed to see your faces for the last time." Grant looked up, eyes a little red, but he tried to keep his voice steady. "You don't understand. I couldn't bear to see him like that. So you decided to focus on a contract instead of being with your father. A clear choice." Vanessa spoke gently, but with a hint of warning. "Mrs. Marion, I know you're hurting, but these decisions might be seen as impaired judgment, especially during a time of grief. If this goes to court," I offered her a small, reassuring smile to make her stop. I reached into the small drawer by the sofa, took out a business card, and placed it on the table. "Harold Benton, attorney at law." I slid the card toward them like a chess piece, prepared to block any further move. "Bring your lawyer to meet him. Harold knows every detail of this agreement and understands well that I'm not confused, not coerced, and not manipulated. I've simply awakened. Vanessa bit her lip. She did not speak further, but her eyes held a challenge. Grant remained silent. He no longer appeared like a son. He looked like a man weighing the pros and cons of a property deal. I lowered my voice, each word clear. You may not understand, but your father always told me this. Forgiveness does not mean access. I can forgive what you've done or not done, but that does not mean I will allow you to return to the place you chose to leave. Grant shifted slightly as if to speak, then held back. I saw his lips tremble slightly, not now from cold, but from pride. Vanessa was the first to turn away, smoothing her painted smile. I think we should go, Grant. Clearly today isn't the right time. Grant looked at me, his eyes heavy, more like a sense of failure disguised as pride than remorse. Mom, he whispered softly. I just wanted things not to be like this. I responded with a gentle but steady voice. Things have been like this for a long while. You just haven't been here to see it. When they left, the door closed softly, but the sound of tires rolling over wet pavement was clear and sharp. I stood still, feeling the faint trace of Vanessa's expensive perfume, sharp and hollow. I noticed my hands were trembling slightly, not from fear or anger, but because I could sense the old foundation of a mother's life had just crumbled. There was no loud crash or shattering sound, only a quiet slipping of emotional bricks out of place, revealing a cold, honest gap. I sat down, clasped my hands, and rested them on my knees. The house was so still. I could hear the wind slipping through the door frame and the leaves brushing against the window sash. Suddenly, I remembered something Ned had said after one of our arguments about Grant. Sometimes you have to let your son fall hard enough so he understands where the ground is. I wasn't sure when Grant would realize that fall, but today at least, I stopped being the cushion beneath it. I got up and headed to the kitchen. I brewed a cup of black tea, the kind Ned always enjoyed, strong and slightly bitter. The water hissed loudly in the kettle, like a soft whisper of lingering memories. I poured the tea, sat at the table, and watched the thin steam gently rise and then fade away. Next to the cup was the notebook I write in every night. I opened to a fresh page and moved the pen slowly, each stroke steady and deliberate, with no tremor. Close, lock, breathe, 3 words, not a prayer, but a new way of living. A rhythm for someone who has learned to find her peace, no matter how many outside forces try to shake her. I placed the pen down, leaned back, and closed my eyes. Outside, the rain had stopped. A breeze swept across the porch, carrying the scent of damp earth and lavender. For the first time in years, I felt that each breath was no longer a burden carried from the past, but a gift I owned now. The next morning, I had just finished clearing the table when the phone rang. The screen lit up. Caleb. I paused. The name, warm in my chest, brought a gentle ache. He rarely called. He usually just sent a text wishing me happy birthday or shared photos of the wood projects I had taught him as a child. I heard a young man's voice, a little husky, a little unsteady. Grandma, can I come over? Those 4 simple words melted my morning away. Of course, Caleb, I'm home. The doors are unlocked today. About half an hour later, I heard an engine idling at the curb. I looked out the window. Caleb stepped out, tall and slim in a silver gray hoodie, holding his helmet. He paused on the porch, glancing around like he wasn't sure he was still welcome. His shyness and sincerity reminded me of Ned when he first asked to marry me. Nervous yet determined, I opened the door before he could knock. You made it, I said, trying to sound casual, though my throat grew tight. I wasn't sure if he wanted to see me, he said, gripping his helmet strap so tightly that his knuckles turned white. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my arms. Caleb paused for a moment, then stepped in, and I embraced him. Not too tight, but I held on. In that moment, I could feel the resilience of youth, strong, clumsy, yet genuine through and through. We sat at the dining table. I poured myself some tea and handed him a glass of orange juice. Caleb sat upright, his hands resting on his thighs, eyes fixed on the floral tablecloth beneath us. I was thinking about the farmer's market. He broke the silence first. Grandma, I'm sorry. I didn't know Grandpa had passed away. I nodded gently, without blame. Your mom didn't tell you, I said softly. He shook his head, his voice thick with emotion. She said he was sick, but okay. By the time I saw the funeral notice online, it was already finished. I didn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the only way a child can understand the truth. I got up, opened the cabinet, and took out a slim brown folder labeled Trust, Caleb Fletcher. I put it in front of him and said, "This is my plan." Caleb looked at the cover and then up at me, uncertain. What plan? I said it was a trust. I had signed it. The house, the lakeside cabin, and whatever remained in the accounts would be transferred to him. There are specific provisions for tuition, healthcare, and full control once he turns 30. He stared at me as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Grandma, are you joking? Why me? I smiled gently and answered slowly. Because you show up when no one else does. He looked down, his eyes turning red. I heard him breathe heavily, like a wave trapped in his chest. I reached out and touched his shoulder softly. You couldn't be there because someone kept you away. Don't carry their guilt. A tear slipped down his cheek and hit the wooden table. I didn't wipe it away. I let it stay as proof that honesty still exists in this grandson. Grandma, Caleb whispered, I don't know what to do with something so big. Keep it, I said. Keep the house. Keep the yard. Keep the meaning. Money will teach you how to use it if you're deserving. We went out to the backyard. The lavender I had planted in early spring was beginning to bloom. Caleb bent down, took a deep breath, and softly said, When I was little, Grandpa showed me how to prune. He explained, Don't cut straight across. Make an angle so the plant can breathe. I nodded in understanding. He was very careful about everything. Even when slicing an apple, he always picked the sunniest piece for my plate. Caleb smiled, shy yet tender. I remember his Sunday pancakes. I looked at him and said, They should be slow and simple. Let's make them today. In the kitchen, I took out the old cast iron skillet, poured in the batter, added milk and eggs. Caleb whisked so vigorously that the mixture splashed everywhere. I chuckled, Easy. If you whisk like that, you'll deflate the batter. The pancakes will turn out like bricks. He laughed for the first time that morning. It felt just like when I was 10. When the pancakes finished cooking, a buttery smell filled the house. I drizzled honey over thinly sliced apples. Caleb watched as I chose the piece where sunlight streamed through the window and placed it on his plate. He noticed and asked, You picked the sunniest piece for yourself? I shook my head. No, for your grandpa. He used to say, The one who stays should keep the brighter piece. He fell quiet, only the tap of a fork on porcelain and birds singing on the porch. After we finished eating, I washed the dishes while Caleb dried them one at a time, careful as if he might break a memory. He asked, Oh, and do you need anything else? I looked at his hands, with calluses on his thumb and middle joints, marks from working with wood. Are you still at the shop? I asked. Yes, on weekends. The owner says, I've got good hands. If I were patient, I could learn the trade. I nodded. Then, this summer, help me redo the porch. The lower boards are rotted through. His smile brightened. I'd love to. I'll redo the whole thing this summer. Just tell me what you want. That line tightened my chest, not from emotion, but from a feeling of hope, a sensation I believed I had long ago set aside. In the afternoon, as he said goodbye, I walked him to the porch. A gentle breeze tugged at his hoodie. He turned around and said, Grandma, thank you for still believing in me. I'm not good with words like mom, but I'll show you I deserve this. I simply replied, I've never needed words, Caleb. I just need someone who shows up. He smiled and headed on his way. The engine's sound faded away, leaving a quiet yard and the smell of pancakes in the air. Night fell. I sat at Ned's desk and read a few pages of his notes. The lamp cast a warm circle, soft as a memory. Outside, early summer insects sang. I heard a car stop Caleb again, but no one knocked. When I opened the door, no one was there, just an unstuck envelope slipping through the letter slot. I brought it inside and opened it. Inside was a carefully folded sheet written in the blue ballpoint pen, slightly slanted and uneven, but neatly arranged in straight lines. The handwriting of someone young trying to be serious. Grandma, I don't know how to thank you. No one has ever believed in me the way you do. I promise to take care of this house, tend the yard, and honor Grandpa's word. I won't let what you built fall apart. Not a single board, not a single lesson. Thank you for giving me the chance to do what is right, Caleb. No exclamation point, no emoji, no heart, just plain, honest words from a person who believes enough to keep the Fletcher bloodline alive. I folded the letter and placed it beside Ned's photograph. See, I whispered, we haven't lost everything. A gentle breeze on the porch turned a few pages of my notebook, stopping on the 3 words I wrote last night: close, lock, breathe. I picked up the pen and added a fourth: open. Open the door, open the heart, open the way for those who come after us. That isn't the mistake I made. Then I turned off the lamp and let the room settle into a deep, peaceful quiet. A quiet that came from a conversation without emojis, but full of meaning. Early on Saturday morning, sunlight filtered softly through the curtains like gentle honey. I was making coffee when I heard a familiar 3-beat knock. 2 quick raps, followed by one slow. The same rhythm had remained unchanged for nearly 50 years. I opened the door. Ruth Delgado, my neighbor since 1975, was standing there with a tray of warm lemon cookies. Her face was sun-kissed, her silver hair neatly tied in a bun. Her gray-blue eyes still shone brightly, just as they had when we camped at Maple Lake. "Good morning, Marion," she said, a hint of mischief in her voice. "Word is you did something pretty bold." I smiled. "If you mean changing the whole will, then yes." Ruth raised an eyebrow. "I don't stick to gossip," she said. "I heard it straight from Harold Benton, and he sounded quite impressed." She stepped inside and placed a tray on the wooden table. Butter, lemon, and a touch of cinnamon warmed the kitchen like a cozy blanket. Ruth settled into the wicker chair by the window and looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and understanding. "So did you finally cut?" she asked softly, yet with a steady firmness. I nodded. She didn't ask what we both knew had been cut. That's how Ruth talks about the toxic relationships women of our generation often build alongside their children, chains that suffocate while insisting it's their duty. I replied quietly, "Yes, I cut." Ruth let out a deep breath. She sounded as relieved as someone who has just watched a rainy season come to an end. "Listen, Marion, they'll call you cruel, cold, ungrateful. No one will mention how many times you helped them, with money, with work, with tears. People only remember when you stop giving, not when you gave everything." We sat quietly for a moment, only the ticking clock and the wind whispering through the garden. I poured more coffee, the warm aroma blending into the air like those old Sundays when Ned was alive. And Ruth came to bake with me for the church ladies. Ruth snapped a cookie in half, dipped it into her coffee, and smiled. "Our generation, Marion, our spines have worn down from carrying so much. We mistook endurance for virtue and forgot that virtue also needs rest." I chuckled. "You sound just like you did 40 years ago." She smiled proudly. "Because I'm still right," she replied. I leaned back, hands wrapped around the warm mug. "Honestly, Ruth," I said, "I used to be scared of being Tibby all alone. After Ned passed away, this house felt empty. I would hear my own footsteps and think they belonged to someone else." Ruth shook her head. "Being alone and feeling lonely aren't the same, Marion. Alone means no one's there. Lonely means you're not present." She looked into my eyes. "I'd rather live alone than feel lonely." Those words struck me hard, simple, yet hitting precisely where I felt empty inside. That was the place I had long buried beneath roles: mother, wife, the one who cleaned everyone's mess but my own. "I think I've been lonely for a very long time," I admitted. Ruth's expression softened, "and now I am beginning to understand how to be true to myself." She placed her cup down, got up, and headed straight to the kitchen window, the one I hadn't opened in a very long time, with rusty hinges and paint peeling off. "This window," she said. "When was the last time you opened it?" "I don't remember. Maybe last winter," I replied. "Then go ahead and open it." I reached for the latch. It squealed loudly, like lungs taking a deep breath after many years. A rush of air swept inside, knocking papers off the table. Light flooded the floor, warm and golden as if time itself was saying sorry. "The house needs to breathe, Marion," Ruth said, "and so do you." I paused, gazing out at the lavender plants swaying in the sunlight. In the breeze, I saw Ned smiling, his hands in his pockets, tilting his head to tease me, just like always. See, I told you this house felt stale because you kept it shut up. I turned back to Ruth with a small, damp smile. Thank you. Don't thank me, she replied softly. Just keep opening. Windows, heart, life. Leave anything closed up too long and it will rust. She gestured toward the shelf near the fireplace. What's that? I looked in the direction she was pointing. It was the old tin box where I kept Ned's letters. I opened it. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded with time. The top letter I knew by heart. Ned wrote it in 1991 when we paid off the mortgage. I read it aloud, my voice catching. Marion, if I go first, don't stop dancing. Keep dancing. Even if it's just your hands moving in the kitchen, Ruth laughed. Then turn on some music. Where's your old record player? I actually laughed out loud, genuine laughter. I went over to the corner where the turntable sat under a soft layer of dust. I wiped it clean, placed a black record on it, and lowered the needle. Music filled the room. Moon River, Ned's favorite. The needle scratched the first few beats. Then the song played smoothly, gentle as a memory, warm as old wine. Ruth lifted her hand and swayed, her eyes shining. See, you're living, Marion, she said. Not just existing, but truly living. I raised my hand and slowly turned in a circle in the kitchen. Nothing fancy, just a moment to feel my body still knows how to move. I listened to the sound of my skirt, brushed my legs gently, smelled the lemon aroma in the cookies, and let the music carry me through that moment. I never thought a 71-year-old could still dance, not for anyone else, but just for herself. When the song ended, Ruth sank back into her chair with a deep, steadying breath. You know, she said softly, every time I saw you dip your head crossing the fence, I thought that bird forgot its wings. I offered a quiet, joyful smile, as if to confess. Well, now I remember. Thank you for the reminder. Ruth sipped the last of her coffee and got to her feet. I'd better go. My petunias are fading. If I don't trim them, they'll die at the roots. She paused, then added gently but with firmness, and you don't shut that window again. Fresh air keeps people honest. I nodded and saw her to the door. As she stepped down the porch, I called after her, Ruth, do you think it's too late for me to start over? She turned, smiling into the sunlight. Too late, she replied, as when someone stops wanting to breathe. You just open the window. After Ruth left, the house settled into silence. But this time, the quiet wasn't empty. I heard leaves brush against the frame. The wind slipped softly through the hall. My heart beat steadily. I poured another cup of coffee and sat by the newly opened window, watching the sunlight flood inside. The scent of lemon cookies mixed with lavender from the yard. On the table, Caleb's letter lay neatly beside Ned's. I gently arranged them side by side and pressed a smile to my lips. Don't two generations, one past, one future, both saying the same thing, keep living. I stood up and pushed open the front door wide. Air streamed in, carrying the sound of children's laughter from the street. In the soft light, I caught my reflection in the glass. Not an old woman, but someone slowly growing younger, gently renewed. Keep dancing, Ned, I whispered, and I smiled. Truly smiled, for the first time in a very long while, realizing I'm still here and I'm breathing. On Monday morning, the mail carrier left a cream envelope in the box. I didn't need to check the name to know it was from Harold Benton. Thick paper, an embossed seal, a carefully written signature at the bottom corner. I brought it inside, poured myself some black tea, and opened the letter. Inside were only a few pages, not many, but they represented a lifetime's work. On the letterhead, Harold had handwritten one more line. All the documents had been filed away. Caleb's trust is now officially active. I'm proud of you, Marion. I read the last line many times, then leaned back in my chair. Morning sunlight streamed through the window Ruth had told me to open last week. For the first time, I didn't shy away from it. It was on the table. The estate, Ned and Marion's collection, had almost disappeared. Only one last task remained. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I returned to Davenport First National. The glass doors showed the reflection of the woman I was finally beginning to recognize as myself. Eleanor Davenport welcomed me into the familiar room, the scent of oak still gentle and comforting. She reached out to shake my hand, steady and warm. "We meet again, Mrs. Fletcher," she said with a genuine smile in her eyes. I placed Harold's envelope on the desk. Everything has been signed and certified. Today, I just want to confirm one last detail, a preservation and a new clause for Caleb's trust. Eleanor opened the file, carefully reviewing each page. The papers whispered softly, like the rustling of light wind. "Harold works quickly and precisely. No mistakes. What would you like to add to the trust?" I pulled out a small folded sheet. "I want to include a little scholarship. Call it the Ned Fletcher Woodcraft and Trade Scholarship for local high school students interested in carpentry, mechanics, or hands-on repairs." She looked up, her eyes shining as if she had just heard a lovely story. "Beautiful annual awards." I nodded. "2 students each year. Grades don't need to be perfect. What matters most is having hands ready to work and an honest heart. Ned used to say, no trade is low if it's done with clean hands." Eleanor made some notes, then asked Buxtot, "Would you like to make a public announcement? We could organize a small ceremony at the high school or publish it in the town paper." I shook my head. "There's no need." Ned didn't like flashy gestures. He used to say that the best things people do often lose half their meaning when everyone knows about them. She nodded without pushing further. We looked over everything one last time. Then I signed, my hand a little unsteady but the writing clear. Each streak of drying ink felt like the final punctuation at the end of a chapter in a life. When we finished, Eleanor carefully gathered the papers into a neat, thin pile and placed them before me. "That's it, Mrs. Fletcher," she said softly. "Your legacy is now in place, Caleb, and those students may never fully realize what you've done, but they will carry forward your kindness." I smiled, feeling as light as a breath. That was enough. As I stepped out of the bank, the sun was gentle. Clouds drifted lazily across the pale blue sky, as if the whole world had settled into calm. I didn't head straight home. Instead, I stopped at Maple Park, where Ned and I used to spend every Sunday afternoon. The old bench was still there, its paint peeling and the seat slightly crooked, having been eaten away by termites. I sat down and listened as the woods seemed to whisper beneath me. Beside it stood the old oak tree, where Ned had carved M+N. Moss cloaked the bark, but the faint lines of the youth were still visible. I leaned back and closed my eyes. In the gentle breeze, I could hear him teasing. "You're tilting the bench again, Marian. How many times have I told you you'll fall one of these days?" I softly laughed to myself, replying to the empty air. "You were half right. I did fall, but this time I managed to get up on my own." By the time I reached home, the sky had turned a warm, golden hue. I poured some water, picked up a pen, and opened my notebook. I started to write a letter to the one person I knew would read it with her heart. Marian at 71. "You've tried too long, Marian. I tried to be a mother, a wife, a good person, and a rescue worker for souls that didn't want help. But love isn't a constant emergency service. You can love deeply, but you shouldn't keep rescuing forever. Because when you do, you forget that you also need to live your own life." I folded the letter and put it in the drawer with Ned's other letters. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was a sense of lightness, like the earth after a storm. It was still damp, but the sky was already clearing. That night, I entered Ned's study, a room I'd avoided for many months. When I opened the door, the familiar scent of old wood and polish flooded out, tugging at my chest. His wooden ruler was still on the desk, chipped at the edge and smooth from his constant use. I touched it gently, as if I could feel the honesty of a simple life through it. I carefully arranged his things, measuring books, wrenches, pliers, and a small sketch pad. Each page was filled with precise hand-drawn plans, tables, frames, and music boxes. On the last page, Ned had written, "Honest hands are the only asset that can't be seized." I ran my fingers over the words, my eyes blurred, but no tears fell. I knew I had found a way to keep him not in ashes, but in action, within Caleb's hands or any child's hand, gripping a chisel with genuine love. I tried to light the old fireplace, the one that had been silent since last winter. When the first flame caught, the old ashes lifted into the smoke and drifted down like tiny silver gray snow. In that moment, I heard the wood crackle and softly said, "Hello, Ned. I've finished my part." I sat by the fire, cup of tea in hand, watching the flames lick the edges of the logs. In the wood basket, a small folded note was tucked inside. I pulled it out. The handwriting was slanted. Steady was Ned's. "Don't let the world shrink you, Marion." I sat quietly, unable to remember when he had written it. Perhaps years ago, when I was quietly enduring, or not long ago when he sensed I needed a reminder. I tucked a note into my notebook. It was placed right on the page where I'd written in bold red letters, "Clear my way." A simple way of telling myself I had seen, understood, and chosen my own path. Late at night, with only the wind whispering through the cracks, I sat by the flickering firelight, contemplating my life. I thought about being a wife, a mother, and now a woman, relearning how to simply exist without a role. Outside, the moonlight bathed the lavender bed, and the scent of the lavender blended with the smell of the woods drifting in. I could hear the insects, the breeze, and my own breathing, long, steady, and unhurried. I softly spoke to Ned, to my old self. "I'm still here, Ned," I said, "but I'm no longer here just to endure. I am here to live at the size this world owes me." As the fire burned lower, I closed my notebook, placed my hand gently on the cover, and smiled. I no longer feared loneliness because for the first time in many years, I saw clearly I had returned to myself. 3 days after Harold sent the final confirmation, my name appeared online once more. It wasn't related to the scholarship or the charity fund, but rather in one of Sloane's posts. She wrote, "Sometimes people lose their kindness to a rash old age impulse, but we should still love even when our right to love is taken away." The photo showed a teacup next to dried lavender. I recognized it. She had taken it at my house during a previous visit. The caption received nearly 500 reactions of sympathy and comments like, "Hang in there. Every mom makes mistakes. You're so strong. Don't be sad about family." I read every one of them. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was simply weary of how easily some people twist stories to make themselves look pitiful instead of taking responsibility. Grant was different. He chose silence, though not acceptance, but the kind that's strategic. I knew he wouldn't step forward yet. He would wait and try to reframe everything as a legal misunderstanding, hoping to negotiate back what he could. And Vanessa, of course, didn't wait long. That afternoon, Harold called. "Marion," he said, "I just received an email from Vanessa Fletcher. She's suggesting an out of court settlement. The language is very polished. I suppose you don't want to read it." "You guessed right," I replied. "Just handle it by the book." I'll reply briefly, firmly, and politely. "Good, I trust you." I hung up. My heart no longer raced like it used to during old disputes. It felt like shutting a door that had been locked for a long time, simply releasing the handle. I didn't argue online. I didn't send messages to anyone. No public explanations. Instead, I went outside to the garden. Early summer had just arrived. Lavender colored the yard in purple, its scent filling the air like a refreshing tea. I put on gloves, cut the stems, and gathered small bunches to dry in the shade. When Ned was here, he would always say, "Trouble fades away when your hands meet the earth." He was right. The earth may be cold, but it's honest. It takes in everything without passing judgment. I had been working all afternoon. When I looked up, I saw the sun had shifted, casting a long, gentle shadow over the grass. On Saturday evening, Caleb stopped by. I heard his scooter stop at the gate, followed by his small call. "Grandma, I'm here." He carried a notebook, a tape measure, and a pencil, with the serious look of someone ready to work. "You said you wanted to fix the porch," he reminded me. "I'll measure and figure out the lumber," he said, bending down to examine the boards, noting each warped corner. I stayed nearby with a glass of lemonade, watching him as if I was seeing the 20-year-old version of himself. Ned was focused, humble, not afraid to be wrong. "I'll replace the bottom 12 boards," he said. "They're mostly rotten. We'll need good dry pine and some protective paint, and don't worry, I'm not using those plastic student toolkits." I laughed. "So you're really going to fix the house, huh?" I asked. Yes, he said, eyes shining. If we do it right. That night, I asked him to stay for dinner. I cooked my mother's simple chicken soup using an old-fashioned recipe. It had ginger, scallions, carrots, and a little bit of celery. Caleb stood beside me, learning how to add seasoning and taking notes with a wooden pen he carved himself. "When did you two eat this?" he asked. "The first time was after our wedding. We were poor then. Just one chicken, raised by my mother. Your grandpa cut it in half and said we should save the other half for a guest who hadn't arrived yet." "What guest?" "Our son, who hadn't been born." He grew quiet, tasted a spoonful, and then smiled. "It tastes like your cooking, rich, but not too sharp." After dinner, Caleb fixed the back door hinge. The squeak I had grown so used to, I barely noticed it anymore. Metal tapping metal, the screw turning in an old hole, then quiet. Standing behind him, I realized peace is in silence. It's the right sound and the screw tightening, the wind slipping through a door that finally fits, a spoon tapping gently on the rim of a pot. Those sounds reminded me that life continues regardless of what someone posts online. As he prepared to leave, I asked, "Let's come back next weekend?" I then mentioned I had found the lumber. "Oh, and which paint color would you like?" I looked out at the porch where the light was falling on the pale concrete. "Light blue," I said. "The same color your grandpa chose for the old boat at the cabin." Caleb nodded. He left saying he would bring brushes. The engine's sound faded away, making the yard feel quiet, and the air was filled with the scent of wood and sunshine. Upstairs, I took out an old roll of light blue fabric, the kind I had bought at the market 10 years ago and had never used. I spread it on the table, pulled up a chair, and opened my sewing box. It had been so long since I had sewn anything. My hand shook as I made the first stitch, which was crooked. I didn't fix it. Instead, I continued sewing slowly, making steady stitches. The fabric was thick and slightly rough, but each fold and seam seemed to tell a story about a woman who once feared being alone, now sewing her own curtain for a house that could finally breathe after years of being closed up. I paused, looked up at the open window. The breeze lifted the fabric. It wasn't a finished curtain yet, but it already knew how to move. Near tan oil, I put away the thread, folded the fabric, poured a glass of water, and sat by the window. I listened to the street, distant cars, insects, and a gentle sound of wind against the siding. Nothing loud, but altogether it made a quiet, peaceful symphony. I thought about Ned, Ruth, Caleb, and myself. Each of us was writing our own story, with no need to prove anything. Grant, Sloane, Vanessa, they were writing theirs too. The difference was I no longer have to read those stories. I rested my hand on the blue cloth. The stitches were uneven and clumsy, but they belonged to me, something small and real, something I could hold onto that no one could take away. I smiled softly and whispered to Ned. It turned out that fabric folds can carry stories too, and this one at last belongs to me. Then I shut the window, leaving the room filled with the scent of lavender and the sound of the wind. No arguments, no opinions from others, just the quiet hum of a life beginning to heal. I rested my head and closed my eyes. Out there, someone was still telling the wrong story about me. Inside, I knew the truth. December came gently, like a cold breath. The first snow covered the yard thinly enough to see the wooden planks Caleb had replaced months before. He had said he would return before the snow got too deep. And true to his promise, he arrived this morning carrying a tape measure, a box of screws, and a determined smile touched by the wind. "Grandma, I'm putting in the porch railing today. You're not going out there alone." "It's too icy." His voice carried the pride of a man taking responsibility, a sign he was stepping into a caring, protective role. I stood in the doorway, watching him work with young shoulders and steady movements among the falling snowflakes. Each strike of hammer, tap, and screw turn resonated like a strong heartbeat for this home. When the railing was finished, he leaned on it and gently shook it. "See? Solid. This will last all winter." I nodded. "It's as solid as your word." He smiled with bright eyes and left before dark. I watched him walk down the uneven white road, his footprints pressed deeply into the snow, Then the wind swept them away, but the trust remained with me. That evening, my phone lit up with a message from Sloan. Are you proud of what you just did? No emoji, no apology, no small talk. Just a cold sentence, like ice. Not because of winter, but because of the heart. I read it and then shut the phone. I didn't erase it, I didn't respond. I simply let the screen go dark, like closing a door. The next day, I brewed some tea and sat on the porch watching the snow cover the lavender beds. Ruth came by, wearing a red scarf, carrying a bag of cookies. You seem bored, she teased with a gentle smile. Why not do something to stay warm? Do what? I replied with a joke. I have nothing left to keep me busy. Then invent something, Ruth suggested. Half the people in the retirees group can't even sew a hem, sharpen a knife, or replace a latch. You're good at all those things. I looked at her and laughed. You mean start a class? Yeah. A hand skills class has a nice ring to it. The idea stuck with me like a snowflake that refuses to melt. That evening, I jotted down some notes. 2 days later, I put up a small flyer on the grocery store bulletin board. Small hand skills class. Mend hems, sharpen knives, replace door latches, fix teapots. Things that can make a small difference and warm a life for anyone interested. On Saturday morning, on Marion Fletcher's porch, 5 students gathered, along with 3 pots of tea. 5 people actually showed up. A retired teacher, a widower, 2 older men living alone, and a college senior studying fine arts. I set out a wooden table, along with thread, needles, a few dull knives, and some old hinges. The day was cold, but the smiles shared were warm. We worked together and shared stories. The teacher recounted stories about former students. The neighbor explained how the wind had knocked down his apple tree. A student asked how to splice thread neatly without creating tangles. 3 pots of tea were emptied, steam curling around hands that trembled a little. I realized that when people focus on repairing or sharpening things, the house becomes quiet in the most comforting way. There's no space for judgment, only the gentle sounds of care. One of the men chuckled softly. It's been so long since I fixed anything myself, Mrs. Fletcher. Seems like it makes me feel alive. I smiled in return. Exactly, I said. Because we're touching something real. A week later, the Ned Fletcher Scholarship held its first round of winners. 2 students were chosen, one a boy whose father was a furniture repairman, and a girl who dreamed of building tables and opening her own shop. I didn't attend the award ceremony. The principal sent a photo with it. 2 children were holding new toolkits, their eyes bright with excitement. I looked at the picture and felt a sense of calm. Ned would have liked it. There was no stage, no flowers, just 2 pairs of hands ready to work. That evening, I wrote a postcard to myself. Forgiving isn't about opening the door to those who hurt you, Marion. It's about closing the door without locking your heart. You've done enough, loved enough. Now just live honestly. I stamped the card and addressed it to my own home. Tomorrow, I'll mail it, and in a few days, I'll receive it again. Sometimes we need a letter from ourselves to remind us we're on the right path. In the afternoon, Ruth stopped by once more. She brought a lush rosemary plant and placed it on the porch step. Put it here, she said. Rosemary is strong and fragrant, just like my mother used to say. When there's rosemary by the door, good men can find their way home. I chuckled. Which good man? Why, Ned, of course. Ruth grinned. Maybe he'll visit this winter. I didn't argue. I brushed the leaves aside. The scent of warm, spicy oil filled the air. It reminded me of Ned clipping sprigs for stew. It turns out that memories find their way back home without needing to be summoned. Night fell. I reread Caleb's letter. Still no emojis, no exclamation marks, but every line felt like a cozy coal stove during winter. I will keep the house, the garden, and my grandfather's word. I folded the letter and placed it beside Ned's photo. The desk lamp shone on the picture, Ned smiling, holding a cup of coffee, his eyes bright with life. I reached out and touched the glass. See, Ned, I whispered. We didn't lose everything, only what wasn't worth holding on to. As I passed the mirror, I paused. The woman looking back was still me. Silver hair, slightly rounded shoulders, but with fewer lines. Not from any miracle, but simply because I had let go of the lines carved by guilt. Guilt, the weight that kept my head bowed for so many years, thinking a good mother must endure, a good wife must stay silent, a good woman must forgive every wrong. Now I understand. Silence has meaning only when it signifies peace, not giving up. Outside, the snow had grown thicker. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, stepped onto the porch, and gripped the railing Caleb had just put in. It was cold and sturdy. Safety traveled from my hands straight to my heart. Before me, the yard was blanketed in white, but inside everything felt bright, as if sunlight was breaking through. I spoke softly, perhaps to Ned, or perhaps just to myself. Thank you for teaching me how to stand tall. Then a small smile appeared, and I silently thanked myself for standing alone when I had to. I turned back and closed the door behind me. The kitchen light felt warm, and a steady fire burned in my chest. I knew that even if the outside world was changing seasons, inside me a new one had begun, my own season. That morning, the mail carrier arrived again. This time, it was not an envelope from a lawyer, but the bank's final confirmation. Everything was settled. All documents had been transferred to the Caleb Fletcher Trust. The Ned Fletcher Woodworking Scholarship has completed its first cycle, and the community grants have been distributed on schedule. Everything feels settled and peaceful, like taking a deep breath after a long climb. I brewed some coffee, fried pancakes, and poured the good syrup I used to save for special occasions. Today, I decided, was just that kind of day. Caleb arrived, bringing the scent of wind and steady footsteps onto the new porch. Pancakes? He asked, his eyes shining brightly as when he was a young boy. Yes, your grandpa's favorite. But this syrup is only for when there's someone in the house worth sharing it with, I replied, pouring the coffee. We enjoyed breakfast in the winter sunlight filtering through the window. I told him about the meaning of honor and the value of hardworking hands, lessons Ned had taught me, and I felt connected to life again. Honor, I explained, is not about people praising you. It's about doing what's right, even when no one is watching. Caleb paused for a moment, then said, Grandma, I want to do something. A small shop right here on this porch. Anyone in the neighborhood interested in the learning repairs, I am willing to teach seniors, kids, anyone. What do you think? I looked at him. For a moment, I remembered Ned. He had the same smile, the same eyes, only his were younger, full of hope for the future. I nodded. Ned would have loved that, and he would have helped you in ways only those who have passed on can understand. That afternoon, the wind gently moved through the porch, carrying the scent of freshly cut wood. The sounds of sawing, the turning of screws, and genuine laughter filled the air, natural and bright. Neighbors waved as they passed by. Some asked to join the repair classes, others came just for tea. The house, once a lonely fortress for an old woman, had become an open porch where anyone could find a touch of warmth. I sat in the armchair by the window and wrote my final letter to Marion at 71. White paper, blue ink. My handwriting was a little shaky but steady. Now you see clearly peace is a choice, not a gift. No one hands it to you. You must tie your losses with a cord of wisdom and lay them down. Forgiveness does not erase memories. Instead, it lightens the weight of them. Sometimes love simply means letting go at the right moment. I folded the letter and tucked it into the drawer along with the ones I never sent. Ned's, Caleb's, and others that didn't need to be read. Those papers aren't for anyone, but serve to free some space in my heart. Evening settled in, and snow gently drifted down. I opened the window, and the crisp, clean scent of rosemary Ruth had given me filled the air. On the table, a small candle flickered, its light bouncing off our old wedding photo. I gazed out at the heavy gray sky and softly said, Ned, I did it. No reply was necessary. If he were here, he would just nod, as he always did after I finished something small but meaningful. Outside, Caleb and his friends could be heard laughing on the new porch. The sounds of wood being worked, hammers and voices floated on the breeze. Simple sounds that remind us of what Ned always believed. True legacy doesn't demand applause. It simply continues echoing through the hands of others. I closed the window, keeping the cold outside and the warmth inside. At last, a lifetime could be summed up in two simple words. If this story reached a part of your heart, please tell me where you're listening from. A busy city, a quiet village, or a cozy little kitchen like mine. Thank you for staying with me until this very moment. I don't know where you are in your life, whether you're feeling angry, grieving, or learning to let go, but I hope you found a small bit of warmth here. That peace isn't a gift reserved for the lucky, but a choice made by those who face the truth and still find a way to smile. Please leave a comment about the moment you chose peace in your life. Click like and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories from an older woman rediscovering how to live, laugh, and begin anew. I'll see you in the next episode, where more hands keep building new porches and where peace continues to find its way to hearts that are no longer afraid of being alone.